So the first step that we take at Results Driven to understand whether a member is at risk of injury is going through a health and injury history questionnaire. We have a one-on-one sit down with each member who comes in our door to understand where they are in terms of health and where they are in terms of previous injury so we can understand how they're at risk.
So like we mentioned earlier, the number one predictor of injury is previous injury. It doesn't mean that if you have a knee injury that you're at higher risk of simply having just a knee injury. All the research shows is that if you've had a significant injury in the past, you're at an elevated risk to have another injury, even if it's unrelated.
After we understand the health and injury history of our clients and potential members, the next thing we want to do is put them through the functional movement screen. We're looking for asymmetries, and we're also looking for scores less than 2 on a scale of 1 to 3.
And what that means, a score of less than 2, in the simplest terms, is 2 is that cutoff line that's considered good enough for that pattern. So if it's below that, it just doesn't meet the standard.
If we're thinking about blood pressure, that standard is 120 over 80. We're looking for a score of 2 or better to make sure that our members aren't at risk.
So if we find that you have an asymmetry in a movement pattern or a score less than 2, it doesn't mean you can't exercise. It just means we need to address that and prioritize certain deficits. So the first step is to find out if there's any pain. If there's pain on board, it's as simple as addressing it with a qualified medical professional. Assuming there's no pain or the pain has been taken care of, the next thing we want to do is to address mobility first. So we want to make sure that joints involved in a movement pattern just move within an acceptable range.
Once we own that, we want to go into static stability. So that means that we're taking the movement pattern that we're trying to address, we're putting it in a fixed position, and then moving the other half of the body in a way that challenges the other half of the body to stay still and maintain a position.
So if we put that in the context of the movement screen and we use the active straight leg raise as an example, then static stability would mean that the hips are in a split position and we challenge that position without moving the hips, but by manipulating the upper body.
After we've addressed mobility and static stability, we move on to dynamic stability. So as opposed to the hips staying still, now we're having the hips move in a pattern that's controlled, which allows the brain to understand the new range of motion that we've created and that we're locking down.
In both static stability and dynamic stability, all we're trying to do is put you right up to the edge of your comfort level and challenge that pattern in a way that your nervous system and your body can actually learn from.
And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, and that's why we love this system. We're actually trying to teach you something, teach your body something, so that you can go outside of the gym and express yourself. Just like how blood pressure, if you address it early and you take the proper precautions to make sure that you stay healthy, if you come into Results Driven and you learn about exercise, you go through the movements with us and you work out with us, ultimately it's about going outside of the gym and expressing what you're learning here in kayaking and all kinds of different activities that you know and love.
Some of our members have athletic goals, like Mike mentioned, kayaking or being able to run again or bike again or play a sport. But a lot of other people just want their quality of life back. We hear things like being able to keep up with their children or being able to still pick up their grandchildren. It doesn't matter what your end goal is. What matters is you have the choice.
So the overall idea here is to take a proactive approach, whether we're talking about health or fitness. In terms of fitness and exercise, we want you to take that proactive approach so that way you don't have risk factors that lead to potential injury. That injury could lead to a rehabilitation situation, and that doesn't necessarily mean, especially at Results Driven, that you can't exercise, but I'm sure a lot of people would rather spend their time spending time with family and friends and cooking or kayaking or being active as opposed to having to get through a rehabilitation situation, maybe still exercising, but not being as free as they would hope to be.
When people get injured and they continue to ignore movement, they're more likely to get stuck in that orthopedic downward spiral, where things like surgery, physical therapy, and drugs like anti-inflammatories and painkillers become a regular part of their life. This leads to lower activity levels and over time takes away your physical freedom.
So what we want you to do is keep an open mind. Think logically and take a basic approach to this new concept of addressing movement first by looking at it through the lens of regularly checking your blood pressure.
By getting your blood pressure checked on a regular basis, you're gathering information about your health. And the great thing about it is you still have that power of choice of whether you want to address it or not.
By regularly checking your blood pressure, you get the chance to see, am I at risk? That's the same thing we want you to think about when you're thinking about exercise and movement. Am I at risk for something to happen in the future? And what can I do about it right now to make sure it doesn't happen?
Even though you realize you have a choice, you may still choose not to address movement or address fitness. That's okay, we can still be friends. But if you want to start to improve your fitness without sacrificing your health, we recommend that the first place you start is with the functional movement screen. In our system, we pride ourselves on our efficiency. We want to try to save you as much time as possible. The functional movement screen is no different. It takes up to 10 minutes, and the information it provides you can set you on a path to take control of your life again and live with the freedom that you deserve. So if we relate the movement standard to blood pressure, when you're trying to address, one of the markers of health is you can find out if there's something that needs to be addressed with blood pressure. No, 24 seconds, I'm gonna get that shit. And if you're somebody that actually,
Some examples of this are halos, AR press, chop. After we've addressed that misdynamic stability,
then you get your strong arm.
after we've addressed mobility and stability, then we're looking for dynamic stability. Damn it.
I don't like that at all. We didn't say
You
anything about
basically reiterated what I said.
we didn't say anything about blood pressure the whole time.
This is true.
So let's start over. I liked everything you said. Can we just have like a
So-
baby's
okay,
mouth?
Right.
Like, or like do like a little thing.
Like from Conan. Okay, I got you.